Hello and welcome to Eco Insights. My name is Kathy MacBeth. I'm the Director of Strategic Development at Eco Engineers. And joining me today, we're happy to have Graham Noyes, who's the Executive Director at LCFC, Low Carbon Fuel Coalition, and his team of policy experts, Becky Bogard, Julie Tighe joining us, and they'll be giving us policy updates on what's going on with regard to low carbon fuel policy across the country. And I tell you what, Graham, Becky, and Julie, that is probably the #1 question we get all the time from the marketplace. Where or what other states are developing low carbon fuel standard programs? Everybody wants to know, especially those that are investing in assets and developing new projects. So Graham, Julie, Becky, we're really looking forward to this conversation with you to help share more information with us about the LCFC, what's going on at the federal and state levels, and how we can lean in and help you with the important work you're doing. Graham, I'll just turn it over to you at this point.
Thanks very much, Kathy, and thanks to the whole ECO team for putting on this series and for all your great work out there. My name is Graham Noyes. I'm the Executive Director of the Low Carbon Fuels Coalition. We are a nonprofit 501c6, which is a business league. What's significant there is we participate in advocacy on behalf of the business community. And we were founded 6 years ago now with a mission that has remained unchanged. It is the support and expansion of low carbon fuel policies. And we started at the outset in a novel way as a technology neutral trade association. I'm sure all of you are familiar with different trades that are active in the space, and typically they are focused in on one specific industry or even subset of an industry, whereas the coalition really straddles across the full range of participants in the low carbon fuels industry writ large. And I think that's really been our recipe for success in terms of having an impact out there in the community and in the policy space, and also in expanding our membership base, which are doing. As you pointed out, Kathy, everyone is paying attention to low carbon fuel standards these days because the policies have proven to be so durable and valuable and consistent. A lot of our activity has been in California. Core to our activity is very close regulatory and statutory legislative bill tracking. So our members are constantly getting updates about regulatory and policy developments step by step on what's happening on bills in the state legislatures. Also have been active in Oregon, and I participate on the advisory committee there. We track those closely because part of our mission is to not just support the creation of new policies, but to support the existence of policies and make sure those policies stay true. We've been involved in Washington State. Becky Bogard is going to share some insider insights from Washington. We've been involved there for as long as the coalition has been in existence. It was Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis who said that the states are laboratories of democracy, and that's really something that we experience, is that every state is different. And so it's a real mistake to come in as a national organization and think you can jump into a state and have everybody listen to you. It's probably the opposite is more likely to be true. And so we've learned how important it is to understand the local landscape, get to know the folks who really understand the local landscape and who are part of the local landscape, work with lobbyists like Becky, with NGOs like Julie's New York League of Conservation Voters, who understand the politics, who understand what happened last session and 5 sessions ago, who understand the committees and the leadership there. Of course, the coalition is looking forward to a successful rest of the year 2020 and 2021 in spite of our challenges. Glad to hear about folks who are interested in membership or more about what we're doing, but want to turn it over to our experts to hear about what's happening on the ground in these 2 jurisdictions.
Sounds like you guys have got all the bases covered in terms of the industry and a great network put together, and we know you're doing great work, so we're really excited to hear next from Becky.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be able to do this. I have represented the Low Carbon Fuels Coalition in Washington State for a couple of years now. We are fortunate in that we have one of our key legislators, the chair of the House Environment Committee, who is one of those guys who will do anything and everything he can to get this bill passed. His name is Joe Fitzgibbon, and he has been absolutely an incredible help. And he's a good guy in that he knows how to work out compromises and count votes. We've always had an easier ride in the House in Washington, and in part that's because of Joe. Our problem has always been in the Senate, where the margin of Democrats versus Republicans are a lot closer. And there are 3 or 4 business Democrats who are really kind of taken with the oil company arguments that this is not a good thing. You know, we keep telling them, look at the map, guys. You've got California, Oregon, this white spot of Washington, and British Columbia. How great it would be if the whole West Coast did have a clean fuel standard. In the meantime, we have elections this year for half of our Senate, and frankly, the opportunity for new people being elected that will be supportive, replacing those who have not been, I think are very good. But meanwhile, there are some senators who have taken it upon themselves to try to educate their colleagues about LCFC, because all they hear about is, oh my goodness, this is going to drive the cost of gas up. They take the oil companies' line, which is not necessarily true. No matter how hard you argue that it isn't, they still, it's a more simplistic argument to say gas prices are going to go up. So 2 of these senators are putting together some seminars about the different issues around low carbon fuels. One is frankly what we can and can't do with gas tax. Another is to try to talk through the pricing issue, and then finally look at the economic impact. They want to develop what they refer to as a cohort, which is going to be a group of legislators who understand this and can move forward. So we're not just depending on 1 or 2 people. The chair of the Energy Committee has long supported a cap and trade or a cap and vest approach. Senator Carlisle has finally agreed that this doesn't do anything to help with transportation fuels and get them to low carbon fuels. He has been talking with Representative Fitzgibbon, and they will come out together with a combined low carbon fuel and cap and invest bill, which many of us are quite anxious to see how they kind of balance all of it. But we've had some other developments in the state that I think will be helpful as well. As you know, Amazon is one of our major businesses. And Amazon, of course, recently announced that they are going to start fueling their planes with low carbon fuel out of LA. We are hopeful that as part of Clean Fuel Washington, we can get Amazon as a participant, and that will help push, especially in the aviation area. So I think that's kind of the wrap up of what's going on in Washington.
And Becky, you make some great points there that I just want to underscore. One of them is the importance of the local business community and the national level businesses and international level businesses that are now laying down carbon neutrality goals or carbon reduction goals. And this is a tangible policy that moves the transportation sector like nothing else does out there. And that's one of the really incremental things that we've found we have to do on the ground is, first of all, explain, what the heck is a low carbon fuels standard? How does this thing work? What is carbon intensity? How does this create a new market? And get people comfortable with that program design, help them realize that this is a program that doesn't require appropriations, particularly while, now that we are in the COVID era that hopefully won't last any longer than it absolutely has to. Budgets are going to be a major problem for the states out there for the foreseeable future. Having a market program is so important, and having businesses sign on and say, no, this isn't going to break our backs. This isn't going to damage the economy. It's going to grow the economy. Legislators really pay attention to that, frankly, in a way that they don't always pay attention to all the low carbon fuel industry proponents standing up and saying what a good idea it is.
One of the interesting things that I heard you say was that it's a fairly partisan issue in the state of Washington. And I was just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, because I think what we see, in the federal program for the renewable fuel standard, that's actually one of the pieces, that's a regulation that brings both sides together. So I think it's just an interesting comparison between the two, and I was hoping you could elaborate on that. I know you just did a little bit, but if there's anything more you could add to that.
Fortunately or unfortunately, at the state level, sometimes the politics gets a little more partisan. I know that's hard to believe that it would be more partisan than DC, but I think that there's the kind of caucus mentality, and they hold a caucus position, and people simply can't peel off. And the Republican caucus has viewed this as something Democrats really, really want. And from the Republican standpoint, it hurts their oil industry constituencies. And so they're not willing to bend. And especially when you have agriculture, which is in an area that's very Republican, not supporting this, that's made it difficult.
And Natasha, it's a great point. It's one of the things that we see that's really different in the different states. I mean, one of the things that made the RFS possible was getting farm state support for it in the first place, because the importance of corn in particular, and subsequently soy as part of the biofuels economy. Again, turning back to Washington State, it's a big refining state, so that there's not much going on in terms of crude there, but there's a lot of crude coming through and getting refined in the state. So there's a lot of oil industry jobs. So that jobs and economic development is always a core conversation. It's always different in every state.
Becky, this is Jim. I was wondering if there's any prediction that can be made about what would be the earliest compliance year. Is there anything about when that you could tell us?
I think the earliest you're going to see more action on this will be the session beginning next January. It is what's called our long session that goes through April. And probably longer because they have to deal with the budget. That said, if the right political combination is there and the will is there, you could have a piece of legislation by the end of April. The governor, I think, would, unless it was totally changed from what it is today, would sign it in a heartbeat. And it would be on its way to being implemented.
Yeah, I think that's right. And if we get passage in the summer of 2021, it would be a real push to think it's going to be January 1st, 2022. I think it's more likely July 1st, 2022, or January 1st, 2023 that we're talking about there.
Well, Becky, that was a great update on what's going on in the state of Washington. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And we'll all be leaning in on your efforts. And if any of us eco engineers can help support what you're working on, of course, directly or through LCFC and Graham's efforts, we're all for it. So we turn it over to Julie Tighe.
So the New York League of Conservation Voters in 2019 became sort of the de facto head of a coalition we call Clean Fuels New York here. We had a bill really that just started being introduced in the spring of 2019 to introduce a low carbon fuel standard that is modeled off of the work that has been done already in California. Sort of layered into this, the state passed a law called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which requires there to be a statewide, economy-wide emissions reductions of 85% by 2050 as a goal of carbon neutrality. So there's certainly an imperative for there to be action on the transportation sector, and included in that is an establishment of a climate action council that's required to evaluate and develop a plan for how we're going to accomplish those goals. We've tried to highlight the opportunities for doing a low carbon fuel standard in the context of a challenging state budget. Even before this, we were promoting that is an opportunity here in New York to result in reduced emissions without having to require massive investments from the state. So the New York League of Conservation Voters actually put the bill on its scorecard in 2019, and that resulted in many more members of the legislature jumping on as co-sponsors of the legislation. We did that again this year in an effort to help raise more support. We have a majority of our assembly is now on the bill. We have more than 75 Assembly Democrats on the bill, which is sort of like 80 is the magic number. It's a 150 member body, and there are 80 Democrats on that bill, and they are obviously a majority of that House. Similarly, in the state Senate, we have a majority of the overall House, and it's almost all Democrats who now run that particular body. So we have a majority of members in both houses, and yet the bill is not yet moving in a way we'd like it to. In 2020, We were very close to being included in Governor Cuomo's executive budget and his state of the state, and that is really something that we're striving for in 2021, because it did not quite make it. It sort of fell off the table at the very end, not because there's philosophical opposition, just there's only so many things they can put into their budget. We also have certain folks in the environmental movement who believe that this, having a low carbon fuel standard and renewable natural gas and others will perpetuate fossil fuel infrastructure. And so there is a different opposite problems. We have sort of a left problem rather than a right problem here. So we have been working, our coalition is environmental groups, it's the American Lung Association, it's many in the business community, which we are also building out. We have the New York Farm Bureau as a member, including a dairy association. Many of you may not realize this. New York is the #3 dairy state in the country. So we have a lot of farm. We are actually, I think, the yogurt king. Governor made that a priority a few years ago. And so we have farms that are interested and frankly are selling their excess gas to California for the low carbon fuel standard. We have the Empire State Forestry Association, who represents New York's forestry. So those are also folks who are interested in this for the biomass perspective and the opportunities that exist there. We, of course, would like to be the standard bearer on the East Coast, and we often are. And although we are in the midst of conversations about a cap and invest program called the Transportation and Climate Initiative, those are viewed separately and parallel efforts, and the legislature doesn't necessarily have to do something for the state to participate in that, as opposed to the low carbon fuel standard, which we think would really need more from the statute rather than just from a regulatory action.
Julie, I'm really curious about this concept of perpetuating fossil fuels as a result of this program. And for me, I'm just not really connecting those dots. Well, how do they get there?
It's not entirely clear, but they think because we're using pipelines as conduits, right, that we would potentially be building out more pipelines that would help support more gas. I think, New York has banned fracking in 2015, and actually they did it by statute this year in 2020. It had been done administratively previously. So it's not clear how they're getting there when we're like, but you have to reduce how many emissions you're getting, and that will by definition shift you over to a renewable fuel. I mean, the other thing we talk about a lot is the role of anaerobic digestion, not just for farms, but also in dealing with food waste, which we just passed a law in 2019 that requires recycling of food waste where you have recycling possibilities, and this would clearly help generate more certainty for those entities that want to build that out. And we have many sewage treatment plants that can be taking their digesters, and actually New York City does that with one of their major digesters as well. And they have excess gas beyond what they're using at their facility that they're selling to National Grid, which I believe is selling it to California.
It's a really exciting opportunity if we can succeed in New York, which I really think we can. Bottom line, I think we can succeed in Washington and New York, and potentially, one or more Midwestern states in 2021 here, to break into the Transportation and Climate Initiative states and show. I mean, what we've seen in California now is in excess of 65 million metric tons of greenhouse gas reduction. Most people in California don't know what a low carbon fuel standard is, but we're decarbonizing our transportation fuels and not interrupting people's lives and improving the OpEx on EV projects and bringing in a whole bunch of new technologies because the market signals work out there. So we're really looking forward hopefully to success in New York and breaking into the TCI states and also breaking into the Midwestern states.
I do want to echo Jim's question for Julie. You're all very excited to see New York move in this direction. What in your estimate will happen in the next couple of years?
So we are hoping and going to be pushing very hard to try and get a bill passed in 2021. It's not clear yet whether or not we'll be able to make that happen, but it's certainly what we're endeavoring for. We are hoping that Governor Cuomo will take this opportunity to take a leadership role on this front as they seek to find ways to address greenhouse gas emissions, to accomplish the goals under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that don't have to wait for the climate action plan that the state needs to do in the next 2.5 years. Similarly, if the state were to adopt a law in in the first 6 months of 2021, which is typically the state legislative session, then the Department of Environmental Conservation would probably take a year or so to develop a regulation to implement that. So I would use that as my sort of measuring stick. So earliest it would arguably would be July of 2022. And that's probably pretty ambitious.
Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you to Becky and Julie and Graham for joining us today. Thank you for all the great work you're doing out there to help promote and all the advocacy behind low carbon fuel programs. I hope that people that will catch this episode might reach out to you, that if there are constituents that are in your states, that they'll get engaged, they'll learn more. And if they get a chance to vote, they'll vote in the right way. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Graham and let you have the last word, Graham, in terms of people want more information about LCFC, the Low Carbon Fuel Coalition. How do they get in touch with you? And what's coming up next with LCFC?
Great. Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Julie and Becky, for all of your great work out there. The great work that Eco Engineers does. What I would say in closing is this is absolutely a crucial year for low carbon fuel policies out there. We are not in the off season. We are in the full season. This is high season for us right now in terms of preparation. The website is lcfcoalition.com or Low Carbon Fuels Coalition, and you can find it easily on the web. And reach out to me. I'm easy to find by email there, and let me know if you want to talk about it. And we look forward to success in 2021 and going forward.